Okay, for the sake of time, we're going to get this rolling. Those of you that were here earlier are blessed to listen to Chief Mike O'Brien on the batteries. Very beneficial, I think, to those. Looking forward to, won't go into the whole introduction again, but appreciate the next topic. We were talking about officers' role in reducing false alarms. So, Chief, take it away. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. How's everybody doing? Good? All right, we're going to talk really fast because they got to turn the room over, too, Bob's got to be on by 4:45, and I got to stand in the right spot. So where my passion comes from this. I was hired as a full-time firefighter in about 1995. I was the third firefighter in this department that was made full-time. And they made me fire marshal 3 months later and gave me an 8% raise, and I thought it was the coolest thing. And I had no clue what I was doing. But it got me in this very mix of a growing suburban fire department with a lot of operations and mixing into prevention. So I wanted to go to the big city, so I went to a city called Dearborn Heights. Dearborn Heights had this we would turn 20, 25 transports a day, ALS. It was not uncommon in the late 90s to be able to do that. We ran about 3-person engines, 2-person medic units. Very common structure in the state of Michigan. It's actually more common now for 2 and 2. And so at this time, I'm a young firefighter, but I have this background in prevention and understanding systems and structures and how they play. We get an incinerator fire. So picture an incinerator as an indoor pile of trash about 6 stories tall. And then there's 6 chutes leading to 6 separate incinerators. And they take the trash with an overhead crane, they pick it up, and they put it into the trash chute, which is 6 stories tall. Everybody with me what this looks like? You got a visualization. It's the hottest day of the year. We get dispatched to a fire in the incinerator. We pull up 5 people on arguably a 7-8 story building, but a 6-story chute, and they say, fire's in the chute. What happened is our power company turned off the power. It was so hot, they were phasing out, browning out. They didn't tell them. And so the chute doors to the incinerator got left open. Now we climb up to the top. There's standpipes in the stairwell, and they tell us to go get this hand line that's already there that the staff was trying to use to put out the fire, but it got too hot. It's arguably one of the hottest fires I've ever been to because it was a 6-story chimney we were trying to put out. And for those of you who know, they gave us a hand line with a red nozzle on it. You with me? This is not going to provide the GPM to match the BTUs, okay? I got my butt kicked, and I was a young rookie firefighter in this fire department. And I really wanted to have very choice words for the captain, but it just proved to me that, right, we don't do a great job of teaching our line firefighters how to interact with these systems that we put in the built environment. When I say built environment, this is commercial settings, right? So we know that the U.S. has a fire alarm problem. We have fire alarms that are going off from smoke detection, smoke detectors in people's homes, all the way through. And one of the things that I really look at is, have we done our job to equip our company officers to be competent in responding and interacting with these systems? And I think one of the biggest things, and I was not on the site, but I think it's going to be very fascinating with how it affects our business, is this Walmart distribution center fire outside Indianapolis, right? Last week they announced that they are suing the fire department. Why are they suing the fire department? They turned off the sprinkler systems, and obviously the fire wasn't out, right? But think about this. How many of our fire stations are staffed with 2 people in a vehicle, responding to a 1 million square foot facility, trying to determine the extent, right? There's no doubt our built environment is drastically changing, right? You look at some of our racking and storage systems in that complexity, but really today we want to just focus on, hey, how do we equip our staff to interact with these systems with a pure intent of reducing a false alarm? In Brighton, Michigan, we're about 30 minutes outside Detroit, 5 stations. When I got there as the fire marshal, we had 2 buildings that would create false alarms for completely different reasons. And our crews just did what to them? They rolled their eyes and they went to them and they cleared the panel every time. And this would be a weekly, if not every other day occurrence in one of the buildings. Okay? So within our structure, we identified, hey, crews, you've got to come talk to the prevention when you're having these regular incidents, and let us throw the weight of prevention at some of these commercial buildings. In the one case, It was a faulty duct smoke detector up in a rooftop, and it was really the wire connection, right? A very vulnerable source. Outdoor rain, moisture, cold, not a great spot for a duct smoke detection. In the other case, it was a church, okay? And every time the power went out, the fire alarm went off. And I'm not just saying the fire alarm panel. I'm saying every time. Now, new fire marshal in a town, Catholic church. Anybody smell anything? Anybody, right? We try to work with them. So to get some attention, how do you get people's attention? Money. Bill them, fine them, send them to court. Okay? We billed the Catholic church $9,000. Were they happy? No. So how do you have prevention on this? We got ahead of it. We talked to the elected officials. We said this is going. We will 100% reimburse the money if we can fix this issue. Okay? So you got to picture this. Overalls, I made all of our crews come in, all of our inspectors come in, overalls, and we're going to determine to find what is creating this. Because fire alarm systems are not supposed to go when the power goes out. How do we know that? Right? Fire alarm systems are very robust. Just like your smoke alarm in your home has a battery backup, every commercial fire system has very detailed backup secondary power. Right? It's supposed to last us 24 hours minimum. Right? And so that very robust should take care of the power flickers. And it had to do with a fire pump. Now, why is it important to know that it had to do with a fire pump connection? Electric fire pumps get monitored for 3 conditions. Does anybody know what they are? Pump running, loss of power, and something called phase reversal on electric pumps. Diesels are a little different, but on the electric fire pumps, those are the 3 things. Now, why do we care about phase reversal? Well, what happens if the power reverses to an electric motor? It's going to go the other way. Is that a problem? Okay, so that's a good thing to monitor for. Fire pump running is a good thing to monitor for because it shouldn't just run. But that loss of power is what was triggering a building alarm. And right, it was something that if we could have nailed it down sooner, we probably would have solved it. So if our responding crews would have read the fire alarm control panel and saw what it said, which is what? Fire pump loss of power, and put that in their reports, do you know how many bills and invoices we could have solved? Because we could have focused to that very specific issue. So really, we want to go through this and say, hey, look, there's this preventable call that we can prevent collectively. It's not a prevention thing. It's not an ops thing. It's all of us coming together to understand. And really, the ones that get me are the care facilities. Our senior care facilities where we say shelter in place, don't leave their units. Is anybody overstaffed here? You have too many firefighters? Anybody? They're bored? Yeah, that's all of them, but nobody is, right? Anybody have a care facility? Assisted living, nursing, any of those? Do you let them shelter in place? It gets cold in Montana, right? Snow once in a while? Okay, so you say shelter in place. What's that mean? Stay in your room. And then what are we going to do if there is a fire? Yeah. Yeah. So there was a fire in West Bloomfield, Michigan called the Heckman 3 fire. 3-story senior living facility. Average alarm, once a week, careless cook, burnt toast, water fluctuations, pole stations pulled maybe due to amnesia or Alzheimer's, any of those types of things. Sound familiar? Okay? We said exactly that in this town. Hey, shelter in place, shelter in place, shelter in place. First arrived, so in their case, they sent 5 engines to this thing. That was their alarm assignment. 5 engines en route with a battalion chief. First in engine company gets there and says, nothing's showing, cancel the rest of the alarm. Sound familiar? They're used to the false alarm. What are we allowing and what happens? So they get in, they said, yeah, we've got a smoke detector on the 2nd floor mechanical room. They go up there, open the door, and realize the whole floor assembly is involved in fire. Okay. Now, as responding firefighters in a 3-story care facility, is that building provided with sprinkler protection? Should be. 95.555% of them are. Absolutely, it had sprinklers. So what was going on? What do you know? What are most of these buildings made out of? wood, right? Unless we get into nursing, most of them are made out of wood. It's a large residential building. And in this case, shelter in place. So now you have a working fire. You're the company officer in a 3-story, 4-wing, central cavity, working fire, not suppressed, or that area where the fire is not putting it out. What's your first call? Get me the full alarm assignment back. Right? Now I have a choice as 2 people in a fire truck to do what? What are my choices? Hit the FDC, hand line, or start evacuating. Okay? So you silence the fire alarm when they walked in. It's silenced. So they re-pull the pull station. It now makes it does what? Do what? How many of the people responded to that? Right? We've trained them what to do. We'll come get you, right? This department has 15 people on duty. And if you look up the video footage, if you look up the pictures, multiple crews, mutual aid all the way through, had to make multiple rescues off of a ladder, getting people to come outside. The fire got so intense, overwhelmed the sprinkler system, okay? And they really confined it at the fire separations. They lost the center. And they had this very thing. And really what it is, in many cases, right, us as a organization trying to respond to a very complex building, but a building that was never set up. The current minimum codes within the United States do not set us up for success in that incident. So there's limitations. So let's talk through some of these, right? So not every sprinkler system is the same, right? And it's about how much water per square foot we want to come out of that sprinkler. But it's different, right? When you want more water to come out of an 1 3/4 hand line on a fire pump, what do? I know this isn't the answer anymore. I'm sorry, it's this, right? But it used to be this, okay? Now it's this, right? And we can get more GPM. We can change the nozzle configuration. Well, in fixed fire protection, that's really not what we have. What does this picture show here? What are we looking at? 3 risers, okay? So within every single riser system, this is your everyday big box, right? We want a riser to only cover so many square feet. So the codes say, hey, look, you can cover 40,000 in storage occupancies per riser, and the rest it's 52,000 square feet. So this riser right here, this is a riser, this is a riser. What is this thing? I have a standpipe. Anybody want to counter? What's a key component of a sprinkler system that we care about? Okay, it could be water. Yeah? This is the FDC pipe. I just happen to know because I took the picture. Okay? So this goes somewhere else, right? And it's what connects, right? The water to the water system's back here. And what's not in this picture is another series of valves in something called a backflow device. Okay, so it's got usually OSMY, might have butterfly valves. There's a silver thing in the middle. That's the backflow device and your main system control. If I shut that off, what does it do to all the risers? Shuts them off. Now, we teach firefighters that when we have a fire in a commercial setting, only shut off the floor, only shut off the riser in the fire-affected area, correct? Okay, so when we're in a building, somewhere on that wall, it should tell us what riser 1, 2, or 3 covers. And sometimes we have to look at these things that are on here to tell us where it's at. Garden center, tool area, plywood storage area, okay? Think of every Holiday Inn Express you've ever stayed in that's probably 4 stories or more in height. Where are its control valves typically? In the stairwells, right? So if we want to limit, we always want to turn off, after a fire event, the smallest part. So in this case, when we look at this riser, these are the control valves for each riser assembly. So if you feel it, sometimes you can tell which one's flowing, sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can look at the gauges and see what's fluctuating. Sometimes you can't, sometimes you got to look. So how we control it is that valve, not this. Okay? I can't tell you how many times I've walked in after a fire event and I've seen those broken. Why are they broken? Yeah, they're not meant to be turned. It's an indication part, right? You just turn it about 14 times. So as we turn that valve, it would shut off our system 1. So a couple things that we always need to tell people: when you shut off a riser, you shut off the smallest section, and once it's closed, you open up the main drain. All right? So in this case, this is a main drain, this is a main drain, this is a main drain. See this big valve right there? You would close that thing, or I know it's a little hard there, it's this guy right there. You close that, or you open that, and the water in all that pipe should go to an exterior or to the drain. All right? So in this case, a lot of times when we go do field stuff with our staff, we need to break it down sometimes to a very simplistic part and say, listen, when you're detailed to tell us, there's a couple things. When it's an active fire and your engine company's hitting the FDC, we expect your engine company to tell us if the fire pump's running. We expect you to tell us that all the risers are open or not open. Okay? And these are discussions we don't always have with our crews, or in some cases, even in our false alarm situation. Because I have a project right now within our community that is every week. It has a bad backflow or a bad flow switch, but we are getting water flow every week. And it's different times. And our crews are really, and our inspector crews are really struggling with it. But really, when we get fire incidents or we're involved, right, this is where we want to know, right? Initially, it's everything's opening and operating, we're good, and we're pumping into the FDC. Question, what do we pump the FDC at? In good fire, everybody want to learn how to be a fire marshal in a couple words? I'm going to teach you this. You ready? It depends. That's all you have to say to anything anybody ever asks you. Hey, does code require? It depends. And you will look like the best fire marshal in the whole wide world. Okay? So, in this case, what do we pump an FDC at? Everybody answer with me. It depends. Okay, right, typically our newer big box, all of those without fire pumps, it's about 150, right? If you're downtown Butte and that sprinkler system's older than God, okay, like it's a 100-year-old system, I'm not pumping that at 150 unless I absolutely have to, right? I'm going to bring it up. Now think about this. How many have pumped into an FDC at a working fire? Will your fire pump ever tell you anything? This is an interesting part to have a conversation with our fire pump operators. So they've got 5-inch Storts, deuce and a half, so however you hook up your FDCs, right? And you're pumping in, you've got it at 150. And like a good pump operator, you kind of go see what everything else is going on because you're bored. You're not even the attack line, right? You are bored. And you walk back to your truck and all of a sudden your discharges are at 100 PSI. Huh. Like a good pump operator, you do this, back to 150, and you notice it goes down again. What should you do? And have we told our POs what to do, or engineers or drivers, whatever you call chauffeurs? Is that, huh? Hey, command, engine 2. Yeah, go ahead, engine 2, or whatever, engine 2 pump. Go ahead, engine 2 pump. Yeah, hey, just FYI, we were pumping at 150. I came back, found it at 100, brought it back up. We're dropping pressure again. Now, what does that mean? Now I'm the big bad incident commander. What should that tell me? Let's assume negative stuff. The fire's getting bigger, and it's creating a need, right? More open sprinklers, right? So can we match change in fire conditions? Can we whatever? Or it could be something broke. I'm not going to discredit that, but we need to think first, fire's getting bigger, and we need to let people know, because most likely we have crews operating, right? So what an opportunity when we do site visits, pre-walkthroughs, walk through this and go to your staff, okay, fire in the garden center, go, right? And we think about what's the first things we do? And let's start big. Valves open. What are some common things? Well, backflow preventers can come out for service and repair. Risers can be broken down. Those are great things to report if we have a fire event. So we have all these different types of sprinkler systems. We have them where they're dry, so areas subject to freezing. And basically in those dry pipe situations, you get this different bell configuration on the sprinkler. So do you see this thing right here that's circled in red? this is wet. This is water all the way to this point. And through the magic of engineering, less pressure of air holds back that valve. And when the sprinklers trip, the air pressure gets low enough, it releases, and 60 seconds later, water comes out. Now, knowing that it's a dry pipe system in areas subject to freezing, if we respond to our local hotel that has a dry system in the attic, how would we know it's tripped? So from time to time, we get disease in our sprinkler pipes. From time to time, they get leaks. From time to time, compressors die. And so we lose air, which allows the valve to trip. If it's during the summer, do we care if a dry system tripped? We don't. It's just now a wet system. But when it's winter time, do we care? Why? Freeze, right? So if we see it's tripped, number one, assume a fire and get your rears up into the attic and make sure we don't have a working fire, right? But number two, if we don't see a working fire, we have no smoke conditions, it tripped. Now, how do I know it tripped? Well, if we look on this riser, one thing that's different with a dry pipe, we have gauge, oh boy, you can't even see that. We have gauge number 1 and we have gauge number 2. What do the gauges do here? They what? Okay, they're equalized if they're tripped. So one's measuring water pressure up to that valve, and one is measuring air pressure. But once the air is going out, it's measuring what? Okay, now, how do we know the gauges match? In a perfect world, right, all the gauges are facing the same way. You with me? They're not the same scale. Typically, the gauges are not the same scale. So you have to look at the numbers. So on the bottom one, this might be 65 psi, and on the top one, this might be 30 psi. Does that make sense? The gauge is in the same direction, so look at the number, right? In the case of this thing here that we're looking at, this is a very complex thing because there's a lot of hidden gems. This is like one of those pictures. Can you spot whatever? So in this case, what did I tell you? If it trips, we know there's no fire or fire's out. And you're told to shut it down. We shut down the smallest section. Okay, so we're going to shut the valve first. Right, here's the control valve for the dry system only. Everybody with me? Okay? Go ahead. Then I do what? Open the main drain. That's that bad boy right there. Right? And we should start to get that water out. Now, we're not going to put that system back in service. That's a qualified contractor, and that's really going to be our stuff. But when we have tripped dry systems, we need to figure out why it tripped. So this thing right here is a compressor. If you touch that and it's hotter than heck, right? Typically, why would a compressor get hotter than heck? It's been running, it's overcoming an air loss, whatever. It may or may not look like that, okay? Now this is a hotel. This is up in a, what is this thing? This is the most anomaly of a, this is why I have this picture for teaching. Does that not look like a standpipe connection? Which it is. It's part of a standpipe connection. So just keep in mind in our hotel, motel, 4-story, 5-story wood frame buildings, a lot of time we have these combination riser assemblies. They feed a sprinkler system and they feed our standpipe. Most of us do not have standalone standpipes and standalone sprinkler systems. In most of our mid-rise, low-rise, it is one system, right? So that's where our crews could hook into in a stairwell, right? So as we continue through, right, let's take a look at this crazy picture, right? First off, you see that thing on the left, wet or dry? Dry. And you're saying dry, why? The bell, okay, so if we look at the bell is a good thing. And then I should have pointed out earlier, but this is another indicator, these double gauges and that flow switch right there. It's a little different than the flow switch on these. Go back. You can't see the flow switches here. These are single check valves. Do you see how it's not really in a bell-bottom shape? That's just a riser check valve, and there's no code requirement for those, but sometimes they decide to put them in. So back to this crazy thing, right? This here is the FDC pipe. They just happened to mount the compressor there. And again, now, weirdness. Do you see where the control valve is on the back side? Do you see the control valve here? It's kind of weird, right? But this is in a basement, so it's a little different. Now, there are types of sprinkler systems. NFPA 13 would say, which is the most robust sprinkler standard we have. NFPA 13 sprinkler, and here's why it matters. It's going to say, hey, look, you put sprinklers everywhere, except if it's non-combustible construction. What's non-combustible? Not going to burn. What do you see? I see combustible, okay? There is this crazy loophole that you all are probably experiencing. Does anybody know what the building code here is in Montana? I meant to look. There's nothing? What about in the commercial? Okay, I was wondering that. Okay, so let's say I'm in Big Sky, Bozeman. Is anybody building these things? Okay, these are big, like luxury condos with mercantile. These are the new taxpayer. So how tall is this building? Somebody tell me. Okay, it's more than 3, but how many stories is it? Okay, so when this thing is done, right, let's just count through this. I got to remember to stay in the camera. Okay, so actually here's floor 1, here's floor 2, here's floor 3, 4, 5, and a penthouse. Everybody with me? That's what you as the fire department are going to say. Now, the building code is going to say this is a 2-story building. This is a 3-story building. Actually, it's a 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Makes sense, right? Everybody with me? Makes complete sense. This is a 4-story building on top of a 2-story building. And that's what the code's going to say. But the fire department, you guys all say, Mike, you're crazy. That's a 6-story building from truck work, right? And I agree with you, but the reason I use this one, NFPA 13 in a commercial setting is going to say, hey, look, you got to sprinkler everything unless it's non-combustible. So that story of the Heckman fire, there would have been sprinklers per NFPA 13 in a combustible space if it was sprinkler per NFPA 13. Now here's that mix of prevention into our operations. In this case, we would put sprinklers everywhere in this part of the building per NFPA 13. It could be a parking deck. It can be mercantile. It can be whatever. But in this, because we're calling it a separate building, the combustible spaces, that sprinkler protection system is put in per NFPA 13R. So we have 13 is everywhere. 13R stands for residential, up to 4 stories in height. Now, because those are separate buildings in this weird code anomaly, that's considered a 4-story building. Now, I see the body language. We fixed this in 2024. So in the 2024 Fire and Building Code, we fixed this. We heard from the fire service, and we fixed it. So when you adopt the 2024 Fire Code in 2030, is anybody going to be retired? Okay, so at some point, we fix this in the code, but just know that they're building a crap ton of buildings this way. So why it's important, that upper building has a combustible attic non-suppressed. It has combustible concealed space floor cavities, non-suppressed. Does that change our response profile? Does that change what we need operationally? And really, it's really important when we have smoke showing that we get the combustible spaces opened up. And so when we merge, right, so if we think about firefighting, get our companies early in the construction process here. Get them in to see how this building is. Now, this building's going to have standpipes. Why? Because the standpipe rules look at it completely different. It's the total height of the building, not buildings. Just know that there's a complete loophole. The bottom sprinkler system was called what? NFPA 13. Sprinklers everywhere. Upper is called what? 13R. It's Pirate's favorite one, right? Now, there's one more, and that's 13D. So this is what we put in homes. So in 13R, we omit attics. We omit combustible concealed spaces. There's no sprinklers in small bathrooms, no sprinklers in small closets. 10-minute water supply. That's it. Life safety, 13R. 13 is much more robust. 13D is a little bit less, right? No attics, no garages, no FDCs, No combustible spaces. It's for your home. Purely life safety. Put it where there's going to be a fire. Put some water on the fire, and hopefully all the occupants get out. No requirements for alarm connections, nothing. Okay? So just make sure you understand. Now, we can make it even more complex, right? In high profile, we can add foam. 2 firefighters just died by one of these systems overseas, and I can't remember where. They got lost and disoriented. When you get this incident, first off, you think anything's on fire in there? How does a foam system work? Fill the container, right? In this case, high expansion foam like this, fill the container to the roof, okay? This is what it looks like in that upper left-hand corner, those big things. Now, can we cover flammable liquids fires, like open pits, open whatever? Absolutely. Cover it, provide the blanket. But in those, right, look at this on the right. This is a much different riser configuration than we talked about, but you know how this works. How do we get foam into a fire line? If you want foam on the end of a nozzle, if you either have onboard foam or you have, inductor, right? We're gonna suck it out of a bucket. Same principle, right? Big bucket. Everybody with me? So somewhere in here, it's got the stuff to do the stuff. Note that this riser assembly looks a little different. So if this was your first do, you're going to be like, Mike, that's pretty sweet. I have no clue, but that sure as heck looks like foam or something, right? Now, what is a little different control valve. What does that look like to you? That would be a wall-mounted post-indicating valve. So this riser is controlled from the exterior, okay? So you would have to be outside on the wall. Now, I can look at this and I can tell you that this was early in the construction process. Here's your main drain. It's just not plumbed to the outside yet. And there's this little thing right here. Everybody see this? This was a weird setup. That's a small riser line to go to something else. Just FYI. Just know that there's some weird anomalies, all right? So we can have all these other things. Deluge if we needed, open sprinklers, perimeter protection. If you ever see a hotel on the scene, a hotel on the airport terminal, and there's planes that can park near it, it probably has deluge sprinklers on the exterior. If there's an event, it can just shower the building. Pre-action systems are a mix of dry and wet. We put these in like computer rooms, and we used to allow these things called antifreeze, and I'm sure in Montana you still have them. NFPA over the last 10 years has said stop using antifreeze. Why? Antifreeze is a combustible, flammable, or it's not any of those liquid. It is a combustible liquid, okay? So if you want to ignite a combustible liquid, do what to it? All right, so if I put antifreeze, right, I put antifreeze in a sprinkler system, and they're only supposed to put just enough to keep it not to freeze based on your climate, okay? Sprinkler contractors are like firefighters. If a little bit works and we don't want it to freeze, what do? Let's put a lot in there, okay? So we actually had 2 people die in a flaming fire in which the fire was flaming, antifreeze came out in a misting situation and caused a flash fire, killing some occupants, right? So just know that if you have antifreeze and you come across it, say to your marshal folks, hey, we probably got to get these out. So you've seen these pictures, but I just wanted to throw a couple more other, right? Main system control valves right here on this thing. In a very small riser assembly, single riser, this might be the only control valve you get. So remember we said keep it small? There may only be one riser in a building, so you're only going to close that. Fire department connection, what's this thing right here? What? Say it loud and proud. Post-indicating valve, right? So many of us, our municipal standards put a road valve box. It's down underneath a pit. You use a wrench to close the fire protection lead. In this community, right, they have post-indicating valves. It would say open or shut right there. So again, if I'm evaling, we have a working fire, my job is FDC, right? I'm going to lay out 2 lines. I'm going to pump to what? 150 PSI. It depends. Very good. I'm going to check and make sure this is open. I'm going to go inside, make sure those valves are open. Life's good, right? All right, that's all you wanted to know about sprinklers. All right, so know that besides sprinklers, we have all these other systems that our staff's going to interact with. This is the one we interact with the most, right? Kitchen hood. How many of you have been on a Chinese cooking fire? Nobody's going to admit it. How about McDonald's fryers? I'm up to 5 in my career. 5 McDonald's fryers. They happen all in the same spot, okay? So when we have a fire, how many fires can we expect? So I want you to think about this operationally. Dispatch, commercial kitchen, fire, you pull up, smoke showing. It's got that nice tight column coming out of the exhaust. It usually presents really cool, okay? It comes out nice, tight, dense, smoke, check. Poke your head inside, you see that that thing's flaming away, okay? Where are we at and what do we do? How many areas of fire can we expect on this? Let's talk incident command, right? How many can we expect? All right, we got the cooking surface, right? So let's look at this fire right here. In many cases, the cooking surface, fire number 1. Everybody with me? Good. Fire number 2 is behind the plenum. This is the left to right exhaust. Okay? Fire number 3 would be where? So there's, I heard attic. All right, I'll take you on the attic. There's this space over the hood. Attic. How do we get an attic fired? That exhaust pipe is supposed to be liquid tight welded. Do you think it stays that way? Let's think about this. We have a vent thing that's on 12 hours a day that does this and shakes this pipe, literally, for 12 hours a day for the life of the unit, right? There's going to be a seam. It's supposed to be liquid tight. What happens to that over time? It breaks. So if you poke above ceiling tiles on prevention inspections and you see grease, if you have grease there, you have a leak in your exhaust duct, and you're probably going to get a fire in that area, right? Where's fire 4? The exhaust pipe, wherever that is. Where's fire number 5? Whoa. On the roof, right? Okay, so think about the roof, right? Combustible insulation, it's not supposed to be, but we've got insulation up against something that gets superheated. Our interior crews can take care of 4 fires, agreed? The exhaust duct, the cooking area, the plenum, and the attic, they need to get on all of that. Now, how do I put that fire out? What's the method we teach our crews? Well, if you have that McDonald's flaming fire and it should automatically go. How does it automatically go? Up in this area, behind this are fusible links. And when they hit the right temperature, it releases a manual cable and wet chemical fire suppressant comes out. If that doesn't go, somewhere on the wall should be a pull station, right? And so we want to make sure we're teaching our crews to find that manual pull first. Because I'm sure there's plenty of firefighters who sit here with a charged 1 3/4 line looking at 5 fryers on fire. Okay? And what are you going to do? And I would tell you this, when you go to these fires, the floors get so slippery. Okay? And it's a mix of that wet chem flying, mixing with the oil, creating a spill, right? So in those systems, right, just like we check to make sure they're in service, we should be doing the same. People can take those and not put them back in service. But we should have if we have deep fat frying or deep fryers, we should have what's called a K-class extinguisher. K stands for kitchen, right? And so it's made for cooling and the like. So if you run across halon, just know it's a really, really good suppressant, but know it will kill you. Okay? So that's an operational thing. Likewise, we have these things called clean agent systems, gaseous detection that go off. If we respond to a fire alarm and we see the gas detection system is actuated, we better be ready to go in full PPE, full SCBA. Okay? Because this is a secret killer gas that could displace. For the most part, it's going to be good, but a lot of our computer server rooms, sensitive equipment areas have these. Now, one of the things, if you start to get into engine automotive testing, you will get a lot of CO2. The Michigan area has a ton of CO2, both local application on engine blocks and cells and rooms. What is the key with CO2 and us? When you dump a bank of CO2 like that into a room, it's going to take away the oxygen. So when we go in, check the fire alarm control panel first. It says CO2 system activation. somebody better go back and get your 4 or 5 gas monitor and carry it with you. Better yet, it will move outside the room, and you're not going to know it, and all of a sudden you'll have it. All right? So we have all sorts of different types of standpipe systems that our crews need to be able to work with. When you see ones like those, who's it intended to work for? Us. Right. Now, not all codes require adequate pressure for you to operate. So if it's not considered a high-rise, standard pressure applies, and they can do what's called a manual wet pipe standpipe. What does manual mean? You provide the pressure. Okay? So if it's manual wet, in a manual wet, I might have 60 or 70 pounds. It's enough to get started, but are you really going to be pleased with your nozzle? Probably not. When you get into high-rise situations, then you will have pressure-reducing valves. You'll have all the difference. But most of us are going to see what you see there. Now, these hoses, both in maybe school theater or a theater, or our big box actually are required. Our storage occupancies are required to have these. Most of us, and many of us say, hey, don't put the hose. But it's a great option for us for what is called mop-up. It is not intended for active firefighting. So you have a storage facility that stores plastic on pallets on racks, 24 feet in height, 30-foot ceiling. Very common configuration. Smoke is lazy smoke, cold smoke. You walk in, you can hear the sprinklers operating. And there are flames running up, and you go, that's a lot of fire still. You go back to your truck, get whatever your protocol says, 1 3/4 or 1.5 deuce, and come back. Okay? Now, I take the same situation. I pull up. It's lazy smoke. Fire alarm's going off. I walk in. Sprinklers are operating. I don't see any flames. I get over, and it's some boxes that are maybe shielded on the lower level. That's what this is for. You pull the boxes off. You don't have to get your hose dirty. You're back in service much faster. Does that make sense? And so there's differences in these. Now, know, as we switch away from protection, right, how we interact with fire alarms are much different. Today's fire alarm systems are much different than what were installed many years ago. But keep in mind, it's a computer program. It's a software program. Smoke detectors get dirty. We have things that go bad. And so we're starting to see more and more replacements. But really, they have all these things that can make a fire alarm go. Firebox, manual pull boxes, water flow detectors, suppression system, duct smoke detectors. In our world, duct smoke detection is what's called a supervisory signal. It doesn't call the fire department. We don't want to know. If we did, we'd be going on hundreds of alarms. It's really intended to do what? Alert the occupant. So in smoke detector land, we have a lot that can happen. We have intelligent versus conventional. Conventional is smoke, go. They adjust sensitivity and they can do other things. In our new modern hospitals and buildings, they're very intelligent systems in which the fire alarm control panel goes, hey, smoke detector, you doing all right? And it says, hey, I'm good. Smoke detector number 2, hey, how you doing? I'm pretty good. Smoke detector 3, how you doing? I'm not feeling so good. Boop. It's going to say, hey, look, we got to check out, and it's going to send what's called a supervisory signal. Hey, somebody's got to come check smoke detector 3. It could be getting dirty, dusty, whatever. So know that your fire alarm systems can tell you quite a bit. We're seeing more and more thermal. If you were in the class earlier, if you're storing batteries, you're getting into more thermal detection, which is a very expensive technology. But our fire alarm systems of today can do a lot. Now, likewise, we have a lot of different ways that we can notify occupants, horn strobes, things that go beep, and whatever else, but there's a lot of different ways. When we look at our fire alarm control panels, this is a great part. Bring your companies in when you're taking acceptance tests. If you're a fire prevention and you're taking acceptance of a new building and it has a fire alarm system, come on in and bring them in and show it to them. One of the weirdest nuances with fire alarm systems, in storage occupancies, get a load of this. I can build 1 million square foot storage occupancy. 1 million square feet, big building. Okay? I can build that building and not put one notification device inside the building. Not one, and it meets code. It's the weirdest thing. So your crews can respond to a water flow alarm because it's still required to have an alarm. It's still required to monitor the sprinkler system. but it's not necessarily required. It's the weirdest thing when your companies respond and you're like, "Rrrr," and nobody's evacuated the building, and they're like, hey, what's up? Why are you guys here? It's quite possible they don't know. And so know the limitations on the various systems. So there are 3 alarm signals, or there are 3 signals: alarm, trouble, and supervisory. Why is this important? Alarm is when the fire department comes. Trouble and supervisory are other things, right? Supervisory is intended to tell the occupants to go do something. Trouble would be as if you cut a wire, okay? Why is it important? A gate valve closed is a supervisory signal. You respond to an activation of a water flow device, you pull up, you go to the panel. You see water flow system 1, water flow system 2, and then as you scroll through the panel, you see closed control valve or supervisory main control valve. Does that change your order of operations? It should. It should, because we need to find out why the sprinkler system's closed. Why would a sprinkler system be closed? Maintenance, testing, arson. Okay? And so we may change. For instance, in our orders of operation, our first in engine goes to what's best for fighting fire. Our second engine goes to FDC. That's the way we do it. I know other departments that flip it, right? And you may have to flip it based on what you know. And so we have all these attachments that are all over the place to create those, right? So those red boxes would be a supervisory signal if somebody closes that control valve, right? Our water flow devices show in different ways. If you're always responding to a water flow, what we want is our company officers to say, water flow system 1, put it in your report. We responded to a false alarm. It was water flow number 1. That way our prevention folks can get on top of it, because now I can limit it. Sometimes those things go bad and they need to be replaced. All right, so the question in our commercial setting is, and how do we get false alarms, and how you report it is different by community to community. So if I burned toast and a smoke detector went off, is that a false alarm? Because it's an actual alarm. Now, is there something we can do about it to limit that, right? So can we do different things to limit our exposure? And I'll give you a good, for instance, one of our high schools in Michigan, we have the State Fire Marshal Office. State Fire Marshal Office does all of our schools. We have very little technical authority. But we do get a little aggressive once in a while. And you have to have smoke detection near kitchens. So they had what was a popcorn machine. In every home basketball game, we would go on an activated smoke detector outside the concession stand for what? Making popcorn. Every time. There's nothing like filling a varsity basketball game and then us coming and them having to dump. So we said, let's move it or change the technology, right? There were things we could do, right? But that's the detector doing its job. Alarm that is false, but there was human intervention. So that's me pulling a pull station, a kid bumping into it, right? So how do we solve that situation, right? If we have a pull station that's always getting bumped and pulled, or we have an Alzheimer's wing where they pull the pull station to unlock the doors, are there things we can do? And there really are, right? We can put protective covers that sound an alarm. They're listed, they're part of the appliance, right? We can go that way, or we can add other layers. If you're finding that you're having some things, your fire prevention division is allowed to put delays into the system, especially when they're staffed. And it's called verification, right? And so again, if we're having a system due to water flow, right? Water flow imbalances, talk to our water purveyor and say, hey, why are we getting such disruptive water supplies, and what can we do? So you can see there's all sorts of types. And what I would just say is, as we kind of wrap up, and I'll take any questions, what is this? Lowe's, Home Depot, it's any of them, right? Does anybody want to come up here and debate smoke alarms with me? I'm in. I'm always up for a challenge. Okay, so this is my number one drill for new hires. And what do I mean by this is my number one drill for new hires? I want our new hire full-time firefighters to learn how to instruct their peers, okay? We put in more smoke alarms than probably any other community in the state of Michigan. Our engine companies, we do a pallet load of smoke alarms probably a quarter, okay? We order smoke alarms by a pallet load. And so we expect our staff to understand everything here. I challenge you all, next time you're on your weekend warrior, I'm going to work on my home, go to this aisle and listen to the conversations and see if you can figure it out, okay? Kidde has done a wonderful job of trying to make their smoke alarms, but there are so many different technology. And note that I'm saying smoke alarm, not smoke detector. Why am I saying smoke alarm? An alarm makes a sound, right? So these are enclosed. It has battery backup, right? We can go from this, ionization versus photoelectric, two different technologies that we can put in two different places to do different things. Now, you want to get scared about smoke alarm technology, go to YouTube, search ionization smoke detector, and watch all the studies where they take a smoke detector and fill it in an aquarium filled with smoke and it doesn't activate, right? We just need to understand that ionization and photoelectric create different styles, right? So as fire department, we want to say, hey, there's different intended technologies within your home, right? But this is where our humans interact, right? When do I need hardwired? When do I need battery backup? What's long life and how does that interact? What if I want Nest? What do we say and do? We literally made our crews, we're like, here's the credit card, go buy every smoke alarm you can find. We had them all out, right? Google Nest, Home, right? We had all of this because our response model's changing. And where it hit us was, we get dispatched to a smoke alarm going off, and our crews are like, hey, Central, there's nobody here. Who called this in? Oh, the occupant did. They got an alert on their phone that their smoke detectors were going off. Okay? So think about that, how we have basically this monitor yourself now in very much, right? You put Nest or Google, you make a smart home, we can have all of these. But what I love to do with our new hires is say, hey, go here, study this, ask the prevention folks question, but I expect you to be an expert on this, and then you're going to teach the crew, and we're going to do a pre-incident walkthrough while we're there. And we're all going to go over there, but you're going to talk, right? And create that very supportive culture because the community expects what for us? If you put the word fire on it, right, we're experts on fire extinguishers, smoke alarms, carbon monoxide alarms, all of those, right? So we really emphasize where these are supposed to go. So here's my last, where do smoke alarms go in your home? Okay, can they go on the wall? Okay, so just think in general terms. We want one per floor, every sleeping area, and outside the sleeping areas, right? So think of your standard apartment. Where do the false alarms come from? It's a kitchen, and it's which smoke alarm? It's outside the sleeping quarters, right? So can we change the technology? In the 2018 building and fire codes, we actually changed the requirements for where that smoke alarm goes to help eliminate alarms. One of the biggest things that we did is we got all of our all of our apartment maintenance folks, and we trained them on smoke alarms. Why? Do you think we run a lot of false alarm apartment smoke alarms? We do. Whether it's careless cooks or whatever, we run a lot of those. And what I would challenge you is, you want to help reduce your false alarms, get that group, train them, let them be your warriors on smoke alarms in their world, and I guarantee you your false alarms in the multifamily will go down. Okay? So lots of cool things. I could talk for hours. Any questions on what we kind of covered today? Okay. So carbon monoxide, you're going to see a drastic change coming pretty much everywhere you have any type of fossil fuel burning appliance or garages. So we're very much traditional, built to understand carbon monoxide in the homes, right? We want them where they sleep and near the units. That's what we should teach. In the commercial setting, carbon monoxide is a requirement starting in 2015 in the commercial setting for residential, hospitals, hotel, motels, and there's a lot of variance and it changes over the years. Just know that we're going to start getting dispatched as you build more hotels, more hospitals. We're going to start responding to more and more incidents of carbon monoxide because we weren't really monitoring those before. You really think about how many of our buildings have forced air natural gas furnaces that we're not monitoring for carbon monoxide for. And so the code is drastically changing, but in the residential, we should tell people where you sleep and where the appliance is. And the residential or the building code is very much that way in hotel, motel, hospitals. Yeah. Yeah, it's the same CRR public messaging, right? Just like our smoke alarms, replace them every 10 years. We need to be saying the same in the carbon monoxide. And I tell people all the time, what goes in my house, what's in my bedroom is a combination photoelectric, hardwired, long life battery, photo, and carbon monoxide. It's an $80 smoke alarm. I guarantee you your public's not buying that, but that's what I wanted in my home. And that's what I put. And that's what's in all of our bedrooms. So, all right. You guys got a great speaker after this? Go ahead. That's a great question. So carbon monoxide detection is pretty much all over, and it does not just sink to the floor. No. Yep. So you can have combination smoke, carbon monoxide. When the new UL standard comes in, the new smoke alarm standard, probably at the end of next year, the new smoke alarms made will actually have to have 2 sensor technology in which 2 sensors have to go off to create an alarm condition. So it'll probably be built-in carbon monoxide, something else, and smoke. Yeah. All right. Hey, any questions, please feel free to reach out. Thanks for being here.